Hey guys, it's me, Joseph. Once again, we're another episode in for Unpolished Discipleship. I'm your host. Welcome to episode 3 of Unpolished Discipleship. I went to a barbecue that our church had, and I'm usually reluctant to go outside the church activities. When we go to church, to just go in the pews and get the sermon or Eucharist and leave. Lately, as I grow up in my relationship with Christ, it's like I have this hunger for, looking for men who have similar goals. And I sought that fellowship, and I'm glad that I went. I met really good people. When you meet men in a fellowship class or in a Bible study, it's so easy to open up. When you talk to a Christian man who's really trying to grow in his relationship with the Father, they are open. They tell you about their testimonies and their hardships and how God pulled them out. So it's such a blessing, and I'm so glad that I went. So if you're reluctant to attend church and other extracurricular activities that your church has, do it. It's going to open up possibilities, opportunities, and I think that's a great thing. Get out of the comfort zone. I'm usually an introvert, but I'm glad that I went this time and met some good people. We talked about the parable of the prodigal son. I've heard that parable so many times. It's one of my favorite parables. It's a pretty simple parable to understand on the surface. Years ago, I used to hear this parable all the time, but it wasn't until a few years ago when, the pastor that I was listening to really uncovered all the different layers to this parable. So it's become one of my favorite parables. And the discussion in our group at our barbecue was focus on the Father. And that's where I wanted to take the focus to the Father. The question that was asked within our table was, how is our relationship with our Father, and how does that affect our relationship with God? I think that's a good, insightful question. I'm glad I get to talk about my father today. My dad's name was Ed. He passed away a couple of years back, and I was blessed to have a father, first of all. My father was successful in business. He was an unselfish provider. He made me feel very secure growing up. And until now, I mean, his investments and foresight in business allowed my mom and my family to be secure and never feel lacking. And that was such a gift that my father gave us. And so, my father and the father in the prodigal son have some similar characteristics. The father in this parable had everything. He was a rich man, and he was a willing giver, so much like my dad. This is such a perfect picture of our Father in heaven. Our Father in heaven is blessed with so many gifts, talents, and opportunities. Even He knows we might use it in a way that can harm us. He still allows us freedom to use these gifts however we want. And in the prodigal son, that's what the youngest son told his father to give me my share of the estate, and basically told him, give my inheritance, and went off and did away. And the father did not hold back. The father allowed him to follow his path, and unfortunately, it led to his rock bottom. The parable himself out to a citizen of the country who, Luke 15, verse 14 says, after he had spent everything, there was severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. I want to just stop right there. God blesses us with our difficult circumstances. This famine was a blessing for the son, because without it, he wouldn't be in need. It was when he was in need that he was able to really seek help and seek what he had with his father. So the parable continues. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. This is a picture of someone hitting rock bottom. And when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Man, this rock bottom picture and him in the midst of the pigs just eating their pods. This is when God shines and our Father begins to do something in our heart. I remember when I cried out to the Lord, I was in bed and I was in the middle of a huge problem and basically made a mess of my marriage. And I remember particularly laying there and just asking God, could you help me get out of the mess that I put myself in? And it was that week later, as I, listened to YouTube videos of a friend who told me to seek out this evangelist on YouTube where the book of Romans really lit up, but I was in my rock bottom. I felt there was no way I could fix this problem that I set myself in, and God pulled me through. And what a blessing. So when we get into our rock bottom and when we feel like there's no one else that can fix it or it's too late and there's no turning back from this, that is the perfect time. That is the way that God rescues his people. So for anyone out there who's dealing with addiction, dealing with a marriage problem, a relationship problem, and you can't fix it, oh man, be thankful. Be thankful that when we are weak, God is strong and He is going to pull you out of this. And I ask of you to get on your knees, and you don't have to get on your knees, but just open up your heart that, God will pull you out of this. And going back to the parable, this is now the focus on the Father and how much He loves His Son. Listen to this. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him. The moment that the prodigal son came home, he was still far away. And it was not by chance that the father was already out there and saw his son far away. The father was not just out there that day. I believe that he was out there every day searching for his lost son. So he was already anticipating, expecting, and continually searching for his son. This is a hard concept to grasp. God, the creator of the universe, is persistently in search for you, for me, all sinners, to come to him. And he can't wait, to kill the fatted calf, put a robe on you and a ring on your finger. That is God's love, a love beyond what we can even comprehend. So Jesus had to portray it in a parable so we can understand how God's love works, works from it's outworldly. My father, he was a kind father. He never embarrassed me when I made a mistake or scolded me in front of anyone. I always wanted to get things right, but when I slipped and I slipped bad, he does not get angry. He did not yell. He always just used to just give me a look and then give me he just shook his head and he said, that's not good, or what I did wasn't good. And that was it. But he was always there and, to fix my mistakes that I've made. What mercy and kindness. And certain that the father was the same way, because the prodigal son, on his filth, he could go back to his father. He knew he could go back. He was not afraid that his dad would beat him or reject him. If this son had an unforgiving dad, he might not go back and he could have probably ended his life, took his life. But the Father's mercy is portrayed here in a very big way. He is a God of pardon, gracious and compassionate. I'll always remember my Father's generosity and mercy when I read this parable. Now we haven't talked much about the good brother. The good brother he did everything right. He did not squander the father's money. He did not sleep with the prostitutes. And he had everything that his dad owned, except he could not feel his father's love because of jealousy. His hatred just brewing in him because feeling mistreated, and he felt that his father was not just. Our Father can show mercy to anybody. How many times I've been in the position of the prodigal son, but I've been in the position of the good son, feeling righteous, feeling that I deserve more, and being mistreated. The ego prevents us to enjoy the Father's love. And if we continue on harboring this jealousy, it would be hard for us to feel our Heavenly Father's love. What the prodigal son did is any parent's nightmare. But God turned his mistakes to draw the prodigal son back to him. And how great is our God? The prodigal son was eating pig food. He was really at rock bottom. It is the only way that God can draw us back to himself. Sometimes when we don't have much, we do not have it in us to come back to God. But with an open heart, we can hear him calling us. That's what the prodigal son did, admitted his mistakes and desired to go back to his father. I was in a position where I thought I was doing things right. I was self-righteous, and it wasn't at the bottom until Christ called to me. And at times, this self-righteousness and being comfortable with our, feeling good or being good, not making mistakes, that can actually be the hindrance or roadblock to us calling out to God. And that's why he doesn't like us to be lukewarm. He says in Revelations, because you're lukewarm, I would spit you out. I would rather you have been cold. And because you're neither cold or hot, you're lukewarm, I'd like to spit you out. That's such a horrible thing to say. On that verse in Revelations, when he says he'd rather you be cold, I think it means that, he'd rather you turn the opposite way, hit rock bottom, so we can come back to him, so we can be on fire for Christ. It's really when we're lukewarm that we can get in trouble. That's when we feel that we're safe. And that's I think, even more dangerous. But anyway, so just to sum up, I think probably got off topic a little bit, but just to sum up, the prodigal son parable is about the father and how much he loves us. And, if you're out there and struggling with addiction, struggling with a broken relationship, God's the fixer. Jesus changes our hearts, and there is nothing that he's not going to fix. So if you're down in your depression, feeling like overwhelming anxiety, seek out and call for him. And I guarantee if your heart is open and you knock, he will come and he will answer. Good night, guys. See you at the next episode.